I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Welcome to Trump Watch. This week, I want to take things to a much deeper level than just analyzing what's going on in current events. Of course, we know that there's a situation in Iran ongoing. Trump's got his tar baby. We all know he clearly wants out of that tar baby, but he can't get out. He's got the tar, and as soon as he starts to say, well, I'm coming home, I won, I defeated their army and destroyed their navy and so forth, he starts to leave, and the tar just pulls him right back in. And now he's got his navy tied down there for the blockade, and so the tar baby has got him. It's got him, it's got the national security establishment. My belief is that this is why they haven't invaded Cuba, because they're tied down. The tar baby's got them. And maybe they'll get out of the tar baby, I'm not sure, or when they will get out of it. Imagine they'll get out of it at some point. But things are rolling along just sort of pretty much as normal. And so what I thought I would take a look at is a much bigger picture kind of thing as to what is it that causes so many people to support Trump? I mean, his supporters are fiercely loyal. They'll do whatever he tells them to do. If he told them to go run off the edge of a cliff, I think they would do it. A lot of them would do it. There's just this fierce, fanatical loyalty. You can see it in elections where he just anoints a particular candidate and everybody, at least his loyal supporters, immediately say, we will vote for that candidate. Not necessarily because he's the best candidate, but because they're doing whatever Trump tells them to do or expects them to do. So why is this? What is this phenomenon that causes so many people to essentially blindly support whatever President Trump does? And that's what I want to explore here in this week's Trump Watch. I think it goes back to the failure of the overall system under which we live here in the United States. The manifest failure of the welfare state revolution, the warfare state revolution, the regulated society, the paper money system, the national security state revolution. I want to examine these kind of revolutions that took place in the 20th century because they really did transform American life. Dramatically different from the founding principles of this country, which is, of course, relevant given that we're going to be celebrating those founding principles that are expressed in the Declaration of Independence. And most Americans have no idea that those principles were abandoned a long time ago with the successes of these revolutions. But there was high hopes, and there's always been high hopes for the success, the long-term success of the revolutions. When I talk about success, they were successful in achieving the transformation, but the transformation has resulted in manifest failure. And that, I believe, and I contend, is directly relevant as to the Trump phenomenon. All right, so if you take my favorite period of time in history, which is around 1875, 1880 to around 1910, you can see that there were certain principles, what I call sound, positive founding principles of the United States that had come about since the founding of the United States. That we know there were some bad founding principles that when the Constitution called the federal government into existence, slavery being the most notable. But there were some good founding principles, and Americans essentially discovered the key to abolishing poverty. Because if you look at the standard of living in, let's say, 1791 and compare it to 1891, it's like totally different. I mean, you had an enormous surge in the standard of living. It starts out slowly in the 1800s, but then of course you've got your Civil War that interrupted it. But then all of a sudden, it starts skyrocketing in the later part of the 19th century when the results of these founding principles of capital accumulation, free market activity, and private property and so forth began manifesting themselves, because those kind of things don't happen all at once. When you've got a society that's totally poor, it takes a while for that society to build up a base of capital. But then once you build up that large base, the growth is exponential, which is what happened in this favorite period of time of mine in history, about 30-year period of time. But notice the principles here. In this period of time, there was no Social Security, no Medicare and Medicaid, welfare, public government schooling systems. There were some, like in Massachusetts, but by and large, none. There was minimal immigration controls. There had been none, and then suddenly they established an immigration control system that was commonly now known as the Ellis Island system, and it was brutal in terms of keeping out Chinese immigrants. But over here on the European side, it would let in around 98%. Certainly not an open border system, as many people, a lot of right-wingers suggest. It was a government control system. In fact, it was the advent of America's government control system under which we live today. And then you've got no national security state, no Pentagon, CIA, NSA, no drug war, no gun control. So it was a totally different kind of system, and standards of living were skyrocketing. They were soaring, partly because you had this flood of immigrants coming in, and through the division of labor, were increasing the level of prosperity. Well, everything starts to change in the early part of the 20th century. No foreign wars. With the exception being the Spanish-American War. That was the exception, where statists were starting to move America toward empire. And then you get World War I. Then you get at the later part of the 1910s, and then you get World War II, and then you get the Cold War and the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and later the War on Terrorism, and perpetual war. I mean, that's what we all live under now. We live under perpetual war. And there was high hopes during these transformations that they would make America a better place. Or if we want to use Trump's terminology, make America great again. And President Roosevelt starts this thing out with a major revolution, the New Deal. The stock market had crashed in 1929 because of the Federal Reserve System that had come into existence in 1913. It had been no part of America's system for more than 100 years. That's another thing that in this favorite period of time of mine that didn't exist, a central bank. And that caused the stock market to crash. And so Roosevelt comes in, and ever since they've said, it was the failure of free enterprise, which was just a lie. It still is a lie. It was the failure of the central bank, which is not part of a free enterprise system unless you define it as that way. And that's sort of the way they've done it. Is, a central bank is part of America's much vaunted free enterprise system. Well, it really isn't. It didn't come into existence until 1913. But in any event, Roosevelt comes in and uses the stock market crash and the Great Depression as an excuse to revolutionize America's economic system to what we know as a welfare state and a regulated, managed economy. I mean, we can see that today. When everybody says, "Well, what's President Trump doing to improve the economy?" And you see, the presidents are measured or judged by how the economy is doing under their regime, and the idea is that it's their job to manage the economy. So if the economy is not good, it's their fault. Well, this mindset of a government-controlled, government-managed, government-regulated economy pretty much comes into existence as an overall system during President Franklin Roosevelt's regime. And this was, of course, also the advent of Social Security. I mean, this massive socialist program, which has become a massive socialist program, that like huge sectors of society are dependent upon. Like how many seniors, I could never survive without my Social Security, and I put it in, I have a right to get it back. But it's always been a welfare program, always. Now people have convinced themselves that it's a retirement program, that they're putting their money in, and the government's investing it in an interest-bearing account. And then when they get 65, the government's taking money out of their account and giving it back to them. And well, it's all been delusion, self-delusion. It's always been a welfare program. People pay Social Security taxes, but they pay all kinds of taxes: income taxes, excise taxes, tariffs, and the money's spent. As soon as it's received, it's spent. And so the welfare recipients get their money when the government taxes one group of people and gives it to another group of people. In the case of Social Security, they tax the young and the productive and transfer the money to the seniors under the guise that this is caring and compassionate, and it shows how good the American people are, even though the whole system is based on force and the tyranny of the IRS. But that was a revolutionary change, and the idea is that this would either make America more compassionate, more caring, or that it would reflect their caring and compassionate nature, and that this would be the way to end poverty. See, it was very tempting because you create all this wealth throughout the 19th century through free market activity where there's no welfare state, no income tax. People are free to keep everything they earn, so you build up this huge base of capital that's starting to take off in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The standard of living is just soaring. Inventions every day. Like I say, Americans have discovered the cure for poverty. And then Roosevelt stops it and says, look at all this wealth. Let's have a system where we seize the wealth through the government and give it to the poor. That's the way to solve poverty, Roosevelt felt. And so that's been the hope, that poverty could be ended by seizing money from those who have it and giving it to those who need it. Then you've got the regulated economy. Roosevelt's big program was the National Industrial Recovery Act. It was straight out of Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy. It was straight out of the fascist playbook, where the government would control economic activity, set prices, establish cartels. And in fact, that's what the National Industrial Recovery Act was about establishing cartels in each industry where they would set their prices and the government would enforce it all. And it was all represented by what was called the Blue Eagle. It was like this fascist symbol that store owners were required or expected to display in their store windows. And if they didn't, oh boy, there'd be people marching on their business saying, why aren't you supporting President Roosevelt, and why aren't you displaying your Blue Eagle? Just like in a fascist country. So you get this government-managed, government-regulated economy. Now, the Supreme Court declared that unconstitutional. It was a little flagrant in terms of fascism. But Roosevelt ends up getting his policies in other ways, and this was especially after his infamous court packing scheme, where he said, well, I don't like what the Supreme Court's doing. I want a free hand. I don't want interference by the courts. He took the same position that President Trump takes today. He doesn't want interference, and his supporters don't want interference by the courts. Let him have his way. Let him do what he needs to do to make America great again. That was Roosevelt's position. So Roosevelt was as furious as Trump was that the courts were interfering with him. He knew what was necessary. And so after the court packing scheme went down to defeat, Roosevelt ended up winning anyway through retirements on the court and replacements and so forth. And America became a government-controlled, government-managed economy. There's also the national security state revolution, where the federal government got transformed to a national security state. This was all part of the Cold War racket, where we had been operating under a limited government republic kind of structure for over 100 years with just a basic military force with no foreign interventionism. no foreign wars. And at least not in Europe and Asia and so forth. There was the Mexican War, but fairly limited, except that the U.S. stole the entire northern half of Mexico. But there wasn't this big military force like there is today. And with bases in, 700 bases around the world, and interventionism and foreign wars. And so everything changes with the national security state. The government acquires omnipotent powers. It was supposed to be a limited government republic constrained by the Constitution and then constrained again by the Bill of Rights. And all that goes out the window. The CIA acquires the power of assassination, torture, indefinite detention, including on Americans, including on American officials. And surveillance with the NSA, secret surveillance, and you've got a massive military establishment, everything that our ancestors had opposed when the Constitution got established. They didn't want a standing army. And they understood that a standing army is the biggest danger to their liberty. But it was all designed to give Americans security. This is really the foundation of all this, is that it's this quest for safety and security in one's life. Life involves change. I mean, it's just constant change. We all know that. And sometimes that change is not good. I mean, somebody loses a job, somebody loses a child, somebody loses a spouse. There's difficult times in life that involve change, and sometimes people lose all their assets and their business goes under and so forth, and life can be very, very difficult. And so I think what people were looking for, especially after the stock market crash and the Great Depression, is security. And Roosevelt offered them that, is that if you will trade your freedom to us, we will provide you with security. And that's what the New Deal was all about. That's what Social Security was all about. You don't need to worry about old age anymore. Give us your liberty. Let us take control over your income and so forth, and we will take care of you in your old age, guaranteed. People said, okay. And then the national security state's the same thing, is that you don't need to worry about the communists anymore, or the Nazis, or anybody, because we're gonna have essentially a totalitarian form of governmental structure. We're not going to call it that, of course, but we're going to keep people safe and secure. You don't need to worry about it. Just leave it to us. We might have to start assassinating people around the world. We may have to do a lot of dark side stuff, but we're going to keep it secret from you. Things like MK Ultra. We will keep it secret so that you don't need to worry about your conscience, and those of you who go to church don't need to be troubled by it. You just give us the power, and you're trading away your liberty, but we're going to keep you safe with this omnipotent power over you and over everybody else. It was the same with money. America got established with a gold coin, silver coin standard. That was the official money, gold coins and silver coins. You often hear today in the mainstream press, in the mainstream media, or you read it in the mainstream press, that America had a paper money system that was backed by gold. It's pure nonsense. Just pure nonsense. America had a system of gold coins and silver coins. That was the official money. Now, were there notes and bills circulating? Yeah. But everybody understood those are just promises to pay. Those are instruments of indebtedness. I promise to pay you 10 gold dollars. Okay? Well, the gold dollars are the money. And you still see a remnant of that, like on a Federal Reserve note. Well, notice it says note. Okay, well, a note means a promise to pay. What are they promising to pay? Well, now nothing. But back then, everybody understood that gold coins and silver coins were the official money. You see it in the Constitution right now. You can see where it says, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coins official, legal tender, official money. Okay. Now, obviously, nobody follows that. But that's because of Roosevelt. Roosevelt comes in and uses the Great Depression, the stock market crash, as the excuse to nationalize gold. We all kind of treat it nonchalantly now. Not everybody, but in public schools and so forth, it's treated nonchalantly. This is one of the most unbelievably horrific events in the history of this country. I mean, essentially, they just stole people's money. This was the official money of the United States, and Roosevelt decrees, well, it no longer is. We're now going to use paper money only, irredeemable paper money, promising to pay nothing. And then he orders everybody to turn in their gold. Now, he didn't have to do that. He could have left people owning their gold coins and just decreed that paper notes were now the official money, not gold coins. He didn't have to seize everybody's gold. When you look at all that gold in Fort Knox, that's gold that they stole from the American people. That had been their money. That's what nationalization is. You know, they complain about Venezuela nationalizing oil, or, you know, this country nationalizing that and this country nationalizing that. The U.S. nationalized private gold ownership. It is so appalling. I find it shocking. And so they end up with this paper money system that they said, oh, it's going to be sound money. This is going to be really a stable monetary system. Well, okay. How's that working out for you? And then you've got the income tax that where they promise only the ultra rich are going to be taxed with this income. Nobody else needs to worry. But they didn't write that into the amendment, the 16th Amendment. And so look at all the people paying income tax now, the middle class, the poor, some of the rich. So you've got this huge system that's been in place now for more than 100 years. And how's that working out for everybody? Well, it's not working out well at all. I should add in there public schooling too, or the drug war. The drugs were another one of their beloved systems that they started with, I think it was in 1914. And then their immigration control system. Okay, this Ellis Island system then starts to morph and metastasize and grow until they use it to keep out Jews that Hitler was willing to let go of out of Germany. I mean, this is when people libertarians defend the Ellis Island system. They don't realize that they're defending the system of government control, which was then used to keep Jews from immigrating from Nazi Germany. And then you've got this huge immigration police state along the border. I grew up into that police state. I can tell you firsthand that it's a police state. And it's grown over the years. Now, why has it grown? Up to the point where you have this huge Berlin Wall. Do you remember when the big fight was over Trump's wall? That if we just get the wall, everything's over. They can't crawl over the wall. And yet here we have the police state expanding nationwide with raids and mass kidnappings by masked men and so forth. What happened to the wall? Well, it didn't work. And it's the same with all their other parts of their system, their highway checkpoints. None of it worked. The immigrants continued coming, and so the immigration police state gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more harsh all the way, but it still hasn't worked. I mean, you know, sure, they've deported tons of people, but obviously they're not disbanding. They're not declaring victory. And the drug war has been going on and on and on, and now they're murdering people on the high seas or in little boats. Like, that's supposed to accomplish something other than just murder? Like they can't bring in drugs from other ways, which of course they are. But you see, there's this frustration, and this is the point I want to make in this week's Trump Watch. There's a frustration among everybody that believes in this system, this overall statist system, the welfare state, the warfare state, the managed economy, the paper money system, the public school system, which of course is another manifest failure, where conservatives are trying to get kids out of the public schools with their voucher program, which is a socialist program too. Same as public schooling. And then you've got this massive immigration police state. I mean, everywhere you look, their system is a failure. Okay, their income tax system, their tariff system. Look at Trump's trade wars. All they've done is just raise prices. Look at the foreign interventionism, Vietnam, sacrificing 56,000 of my generation for nothing. Okay, they said, oh, the dominoes are going to fall, the Reds are coming against. It was all part of the Cold War racket. Same with Korea. These were civil wars. And then you get the whole war on terrorism thing as a blowback from foreign interventionism that they blame on hatred for America's freedom and values. And then you get Iraq and Afghanistan and Iran and Venezuela and coups and torture and indefinite detention and state-sponsored assassinations, including of U.S. officials. And it's just one great big failure. And this frustrates people, especially on immigration. They get angry. By golly, Biden's got an open border system, Jacob. He's got open borders. I said, well, no, he doesn't really have open borders. He's got a border patrol down there. They got highway checkpoints down there. Yeah, but Jacob, that's open borders. No, it really isn't. I guarantee you. You don't want to get crossed with the border patrol. You don't want to get crossed with ICE. They'll kill you. And that's not open borders. See, that's a system that isn't working, and that angers them. When you tell them your system isn't working. In 9/11, they had a border control system that those guys came in and they committed this act of terrorism. When you point out to them that their system failed, they get really frustrated and angry. No, Jacob, it's open borders. It's open borders. Well, okay, you're not going to be able to reason with them. Their drug war, they're convinced that if they just keep shooting these boat people, they're going to finally win this thing. Poverty exists widespread in the United States. Out of control debt. I mean, you've got what? I don't know how many trillions of dollars in debt now. It's incredible. And the taxes soaring through the roof, income taxes as well as tariffs, which are taxes, even though Trump tries to convince people that it's the foreign nation who's paying the tax. It's the American people paying the tax. Now you've got this latest intervention in Iran, soaring prices. Everywhere you look, it's failure. And it's time Americans just face that. The welfare state is a failure. The warfare state is a failure. The drug war is a failure. The national security state is a failure. The public school system is a failure. The immigration control system is a failure. It's all a failure. And that's why people move to Trump. It's a last gasp that if only we can get a strong man, he can make this system work. He can make America great again. We don't need to dismantle the system, Jacob, like you're saying. We don't need to restore the sound founding principles of this country. The sound founding principles that characterized the late 1800s, like no income tax, no Social Security, no Medicare, no Medicaid, immigration controls to speak of, and so forth. At least immigration as it was before the Ellis Island system. Open borders, in other words. We don't need to do all that, Jacob. You're wrong. Our status system can work, and we're going to make it work with a strong man. And Trump's our strong man. And I think it's that sense of dis-ease with the system that most Americans support and believe in that has caused people to do this blind support of Trump. That all we need is a strong man. If we get a strong man, he's going to make America great again. He's going to make this system work. And if it's not him, the Democrats will have their own strong man. Okay, whoever that may be, or strong woman like Kamala Harris or whatever. But they all want this system to succeed, and it'll never succeed. It is an inherently defective system. It is an abomination. The whole system or series of systems is an abomination. It's a moral abomination. It's a social abomination. It's a religious abomination. It's an economic abomination. It's an abomination in every sense of the word. And there's only one solution to it, and that's the libertarian solution. Dismantle it. Dismantle all these evil, immoral, destructive, deadly systems. Get rid of them. But you see that they don't want to do that. The status, they love statism. They love this idea of security. No, the government's keeping us safe, Jacob. The government's a good government, Jacob. Oh, okay, it's a little ruthless at times. Yeah, sure, it bombs people and kills people and assassinates people and tortures people, but it's basically a good government, Jacob. It's kind to us. It helps us with our Social Security. It helps us with our Medicare. You see, that's what's the real irony is that the leftists, they see the ruthlessness of this government, especially with respect to foreigners. I mean, you can see their attitude toward people in Cuba. I mean, just let them starve to death. They don't care. If they have to die as part of a regime change operation, okay. But the leftists can see that, but then, but Jacob, it's a kind government. It's helping us with our Social Security and our welfare. They don't see the evil side of the welfare state. They still hearken back to Roosevelt, that Roosevelt was such a great president, one of our greatest presidents, for transforming America's way of life without even the semblance of a constitutional amendment. I mean, that's our system. When you want to change your system, you've got to go through a constitutional amendment. But Roosevelt didn't do that. You look at the monetary system. Look at the value of the dollar. From the time that Roosevelt did that to this time, it's a downward plunge in value of this paper dollar. I mean, that's essentially a tax. That's the inflation tax. They inflate the money supply by printing up new quantities of money. They spend the money, and the value of everybody else's money goes down. That's the inflation tax. It's no different from an income tax. It's just an inflation tax. It's insidious. It's fraudulent. But it's a failure. Just like all the other systems that I've mentioned. They're just a failure. And I see this move toward Trump, this blind loyalty, is just one last gasp method of saying, we're going to make this statism work. We're going to make it work. And deep down, I think that the Democrats, they don't like Trump on a personal level, but I think deep down, they would love to see him. They would not be disappointed to see him make this whole system work too, because they believe in the system as much as Republicans do. Yeah, the Trump thing's more of a personality difference than it is a difference in the sense that they're all hoping that somebody will come along and show that this huge statist, welfare, warfare state, managed economy, paper money, immigration control, statist public schooling, drug war system will finally work, which it won't. The only solution to all this is liberty. That's Trump Watch. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, thank you for your great support of the Future of Freedom Foundation.